Well, welcome. Tonight we're going to talk about a very exciting day in a couple different areas. But from the liberal perspective, I'm sure we'll get opinions. Why don't we start with introductions?
Okay. My name is Rand Barthel, and I live in Mendon. I'm a member of the Mendon Democratic Town Committee, and I'm also a member of the 350 Massachusetts Climate Action Network.
My name is Glenn Wyke. I'm from Milford, and I am from the Milford Democratic Town Committee. I'm the treasurer.
Christine Crane, member of the Democratic Town Committee in Milford, and a state committee member.
Who wants to start? I mean, today the most profound comment I heard was, now we have no speaker, but we still have the same problems we had yesterday.
You got into one. I mean, we don't have a speaker, and perhaps this was maybe the fact that it took him 15 votes and numerous concessions to get the speakership, and those concessions included provisions that made it really easy for them to pull the plug on him. Pretty much guaranteed, I think, that this was going to happen eventually.
I agree. The minute they said one member
Yeah.
could pull the pin on the grenade,
Yeah.
you knew it was just a matter of time.
Yeah. I mean, why on earth would you accept a job on those terms?
You want the power.
But what makes you think you have the power?
I don't know. It seems like such a coveted role, and yet, really,
I think
what are the benefits?
I think he was deeply deluded about whether he actually had the power. His strings were going to be pulled.
No, they were pulled from the get-go on that.
Well, he had a margin of what, 4 votes?
5, I think.
Okay,
but
5.
Yeah.
You turn around and say, the wins alone can change 5 votes.
Right.
Not anything substantive, but, and I get a kick out of this, is it Matt Gaetz?
Yeah, that guy, the guy from Florida.
The guy whose job is to urinate on everybody else's bushes.
The man who's being investigated for ethical issues,
Right.
that guy.
Yeah.
Credibly accused of child sex trafficking.
But other than that, he's a great guy.
No, but,
He's got great hair.
oh jeez.
And a big forehead.
Please, we'll get into here with the accusations of why Hunter Biden cut his hair.
Oh, yeah.
But realistically, you say, okay, Mr. Gates, what have you done since you've been in office?
He's got a lot of TV time.
Yep.
But
He
doing
makes
what?
headlines. What's the point? They got Kardashians. He's just the
Right.
Kardashians of the Congress, really, when you think about
That's
it.
a good way of putting it, because
Yeah.
I see no value, no intrinsic value
Famous for being
that he's
famous.
brought.
Well, you could
I
say
still
the
don't
same.
understand who the Kardashians are.
Yeah, I know. I'm out of the loop on that one too.
I tried, I'll
Oh.
admit, at least 5 times to watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians,
I
that
can't. I
show.
couldn't stomach that show.
I would last 3 or 4 minutes, maybe 5, and I couldn't take it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So then I'd come back and say, it's got to be something to this. After 4 or 5 times, I said, no,
There isn't.
there
No,
is nothing.
There's no point to the show. No point to Matt Gaetz. There you go.
But somehow he has put us in a unique position. I think this is the first or second time.
This is the first time this has happened.
Twice. Now this is twice that they've been tried to do it. One failed,
Right. Back in 1915.
somewhere in that range, and today it passed. What I don't understand is what you think you're going to get that McCarthy wasn't giving you. A straight line, maybe?
I don't think McCarthy could have done anything. I think they just wanted a grandstand. They wanted to rattle the cage. I think it's a distraction for what's happening with Trump in the, I think a lot of it is a lot of fluff and distraction. Oh, look at this, keys over here.
Right.
They also want to go on and on about how they want to cut budgets, and it's not going to happen with, crazy things aren't going to happen with the Democrats owning the Senate. So it's all just grandstanding and a waste of time. But they want to cut veterans benefits. They want to cut Medicaid. They want to cut food stamps. They just want to cut everything across the board. All the things that an average American might rely on at some point in their life. they want to gut it all. Certainly not going to raise taxes on rich people. That is way off the table.
But when you say that, aren't the richest people in this country paying most of the taxes?
Only because they make so much more than everybody else.
Yeah, but see, I got a hard time. I hear about these people making hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're only paying 20 to 50 million in tax. The problem I have is none of my friends, maybe yours, pay 20 to 50 million dollars in tax.
Not the last I heard.
So I have a hard time going to them saying, Glenn, you're not paying enough. You only paid $30 million last year.
It's got to be proportionate to what you make, though, and that's the whole point. That they're paying so much less than given what they make. And we're paying a higher percentage of our own money to pay taxes. It's the middle class that carries the tax base, really, in this country.
Does it?
Yeah, of course. The percentage I pay in taxes is higher than the percentage a lot of the billionaires pay in taxes, proportionately. Would you
Well,
agree?
also, the other thing about that is that when you are extremely wealthy, you have a great deal of control. Most of your income, you get to decide how much income you want to take, and often not much of it is really in the form of a salary. It's in the form of capital gains, which are taxed at a lower rate, and there are all kinds of dodges
Right.
that enable them to kind of skate by, and but that's a whole other discussion. We're not actually going to be able to do anything about any of this
But
until
see,
the
I
next
have no
Congress
problem
anyway.
with CEOs and C-level players making a blessed fortune if they're making it on stock. Because that means their stockholders are making 10 to 100 times more. I have a fundamental problem when I see a CEO making a lot of money and the value of his company or her company decreased.
Well, but then there are all kinds of games that senior management can play to manipulate the stock price in the short term, and some of those are unhealthy to the underlying business, and so there's been a lot of that in the last few decades of
Stock buybacks, for instance,
Yeah.
where they're having the company buy back its own shares to pump up the share price, so that if that's part of the pay package, that the share price has to go up by a certain increment, they can make sure that happens by just buying the stock.
Yeah, but
up.
don't the stockholders make out on that too?
Oh, they do. But do the employees?
No.
Does the rest of the country?
Does it make the company? Does it add to the health and strength of the company that they're trying to build? And so I'm also okay with forms of compensation that reward the long-term development of really great companies that are really moving forward and increasing their profitability and so forth. I think that the way that is done in the form of stock options and so on often actually doesn't achieve that.
Well, that's one of the problems I have with the board of directors, forgetting that they're supposed to be there for the stockholders.
And they're actually supposed to do work.
But I mean, realistically, having the CEO control the appointments
Yes.
bothers me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a conflict of interest.
Yes.
A definite, because the board is supposed to be controlling the actions of the CEO.
Right.
Checks and balances.
And
yeah.
when he's voting them huge pay increases, there
Right.
sometimes people don't really remember what they were there to do.
There's another aspect to it too, where a lot of the board of directors are CEOs of other companies, and so they'll
Take care of each other.
take care of each other, and the better the pay package they can give to one person means it'll reflect back on them, and they'll
Yeah,
get a better pay package.
I have a hard time with, you're on my board, so you're on my comp committee, and I'm on your comp committee.
So let's scratch each other's back, shall we?
Exactly. And you sit there and say, that makes no sense to me. Now, the other thing that, from a union point of view, I've heard, the employees should take direct benefit when the company does better. That sounds good.
That's part of what the UAW is striking
fighting
over
for.
right now.
But now if the company goes down, do they take a cut in
They
pay?
already
They
took
did.
a cut back.
Well,
Or two,
thank
That
you.
happened.
They
Yeah.
took a huge haircut in 2008, 2009.
When the economy tanked, they gave up a lot of concessions they made in their contract. And the
But now
problem
what
is
they're
they never
asking
got it back
for-
now that they're making money again.
What they're asking for, is that reasonable?
It would bring them whole to where they would have been if they kept their pay package
Back
from
when.
2009.
See, that is not coming out. I mean, when you're hearing 40% pay increase,
Well, look who owns the paper, Murdoch. I mean, a lot of the oligarchs own the media, so of course their spin is going to be not the full story.
because, when I saw the list, we want 40% increase, and we want to work 1 day less a week. That's
Well, you
worse than the
ask for a
French.
lot more. You know you're not going to get the whole thing.
This is a negotiation.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you got to come out strong with something, and then you go from there. It's a dance that you do, and hopefully, even if you got 40% over a period of time, just to catch them up. Most contracts are not going to give them like 40% right off
But-
the bat.
But this will result, there will be an agreement eventually because it's in both parties' interest to get back to work and get back to making cars. Everybody knows they have to do that sooner or later.
Yeah, the
So-
thing that scares me is, will they get back and all of a sudden they've lost so much market share?
We shall see.
And the employees are losing money. They're not getting paid.
Well, that's
That's the risk
actually
you take.
that's actually an additional piece of leverage that the union has over the company. Is the company is looking at that market share issue, and they don't want to have companies from outside the country introducing new products that they can't compete with because
They're
can't produce
stalled.
them.
Right.
Yeah, especially
And-
when those companies are doing it in non-union
Non-union.
states.
Right. Well, and in non-union states are another issue that we have in this country. And I think we may be the only country that has some of it, parts of it being favorable to unions and parts of them being hostile to unions.
But isn't that American choice?
Now it's the states' rights.
It's states' rights, it's history, and it's I think it's pretty unique to the United States. I'm not sure there is any other major country that has that kind of situation.
There's a fairly unique amount of violence that happens in the southern states if you try to unionize. I mean, there's some browbeating initially, but it can quickly escalate into the police or others doing violence on the organizers.
Yep.
But if most of the employees want a union, they can vote union, right?
Well, it takes a lot because they usually get a lot of hostile meetings. I mean, companies are not supposed to spend their own money on union busting, but it happens all the time. And then you have the National Labor Relations, which were underfunded and understaffed, and they
Packed
didn't.
with people who were hostile to labor.
Yeah,
and-
and so there was a lot of barriers to people organizing. You're right. In theory, they do have a right to ask for a union.
I mean, you think back in the 20s. No, I wasn't there at that time. But Upton Sinclair and the Muckrakers, they came about because the workers were being grossly taken advantage of.
Yes.
And they needed unions to survive. But then it seems like over the last couple decades, the interest in unions went down. And now
After
it seems
the
to be coming back.
1960s,
Yeah.
we were up at almost 40% unionized around the
Right.
50s and stuff, and then it's slowly trickling down. I think sometimes people forget how much union brought to the table, and and then of
Well-
course, I think Reagan.
Well, Reagan came
when-
along. He
when
busted the air traffic
traffic
controllers union
controllers.
and began a period of the government being hostile to unions as part of the Reagan Thatcher ideology of
Trickle down?
free market fundamentalism, and so that became, and that has now led us to the situation where we have the levels of income and wealth inequality that we have.
There was also a fissure that happened in the late 60s and early 70s over Vietnam, where the unions were very Vietnam War, and the Democratic
Exactly.
electorate, generally speaking, was against the war.
Increasingly against it, yeah.
And so that led to Democrats taking half a step away from unions, which in the long view was extremely counterproductive. And it let Republicans have that opening where, you know, the unions voted for Nixon in '72, as I recall. And then they voted, many of them voted for Reagan. I don't know what the breakdown was, but many did vote for Reagan because Reagan was a union guy. He grew up in the unions.
Wasn't he the president of the actors?
He was.
He
for
was.
a time,
Screen
yeah.
actors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as a governor, I don't think that was his record necessarily. But obviously, he took a very different turn when he became commander-in-chief.
But now you've got our president saying he is the most pro-union president ever. He walked the picket line.
Mm-hmm.
Has he been good for the unions?
Lukewarm. I think
Mm-hmm.
I think he could do better.
Right.
I think that the pressure that a lot of people know, we have a lot of strikes. We're empowered more, and I think he's going to have to yield to that. But that's democracy, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
bottom up, people complain and push on our elected officials to do something. And
No, we think of it as, I think, in essence, my view of Biden is that he wants to be in the middle of where the Democratic Party is on issues in general. He doesn't want to be out on the edge. And so the way you influence Biden is by moving the party in the direction you want to move it in, and he'll come along for the ride. So we have succeeded in making the Democratic Party significantly more progressive than it was under Obama. And a lot of that has been to do with, you know, the advent of people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and the, you know, and the new labor militancy that we are now seeing, and the climate movement, and all these things kind of add together to create a pressure on Biden that if he wants to build enthusiasm for his candidacy, you know, he actually had to give us something.
I also think that Trump has helped the unions along.
Oh, tremendously.
Because I think things had to get, unfortunately, really bad
Mm-hmm.
for people to start pushing back. And so I think that that's helped.
I mean, Trump was one of the most anti-union presidents that we've had. Numerous occasions where the labor secretary could have done something and did the opposite of what should have been done to help crush unions or stop unions forming.
But now, you know, when the whole election came about, I thought Trump was doing the best thing he ever could to make elections legit. He called out all the states. He said they're all crooks. They're going to steal my election. Now, if I'm the Attorney General and I'm in charge of the election and I've got Trump screaming that I'm going to have a rigged election, I'm going to go out of my way to make it perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make sure that every dang vote is processed fairly. So I sat there and said, this guy, if he really thinks he's changing it, he's changing it to the better. Because I came out of that election believing, you know, when you hear it was rigged, it was done this way. Wait a minute. The people who were in charge knew they were being looked at under a microscope.
Well, Trump's not the brightest bulb, I mean, let's face it.
But, you know, you turn around and say, now, for the unions, I didn't see a lot of enthusiasm. Sorry, I know you'll hate me for that. But when Trump was there. But it seems like he annoyed enough people that, you know, when I hear Starbucks people unionizing, Amazon people unionizing, seems
They're
like the
trying to.
unions.
Trying to.
Well, but they're trying. 5 years ago, I never even heard they were even trying.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they weren't, I just didn't notice. So, you know, you sit there and say somebody like a Trump can actually be a positive factor for the unions.
Only insofar as that
You're trying to
there's
spin
a
from,
stark difference between the party that's generally pro-union and the party that is definitely not, which is the Republican Party.
I'm
There
not,
used to be pro-labor Republicans in Congress, and that lasted all the way up until I think around 2000 or 2002. And then they were just all swept out for people who towed the billionaire party line, which is no unions. There isn't one left, not in Congress anyway.
so where do the unions go from here?
More organizing,
Yeah.
more
trying to get more equitable
organize more
wages and
industries,
working
maybe
place
try to
conditions.
maybe try to do something about the non-union South. Maybe
They're
it's
constantly
rebuilding.
organizing. I mean, in my union, branching out and, organizing. We started out with state workers and then organized private sector that got state funding in those agencies, and then childcare workers, and then organized higher ed. So over the years, we've grown to about 20,000 members.
It's funny because when I was a kid, Dad worked for Framingham General Motors, and that was very union.
Mm-hmm.
So my whole formative years early on was all about the union.
How do you feel about the union today?
Ambivalent.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. It feels like mediocrity is the goal. When I was number one salesperson at Waters, I reaped the rewards of that.
Mm-hmm.
I worked
You
real
had to
hard.
work hard to get more money. And
You know,
I get where you're going with this.
And it seems
It
like the
promotes
overachiever.
mediocrity.
Yes,
And can I speak to that?
please.
Because, you're right. Sometimes, and I see it, it can feel and does at times promote mediocrity. No question. Overall, it does protect people from arbitrary discipline and being treated fairly, rewards seniority, so it retains workers, and there's not a lot of turnover. And people say that, oh, the union, you can't get fired. I said, no, trust me. Because I was a union steward, I was a regional vice president in my union and secretary, recording secretary. I have walked people out of the office after they got fired. You can get fired. What the union does, we have a contract, and the contract protects our rights. If you don't do your job, that contract's not going to protect you. What happens a lot of times I've seen, is that bosses, administration, they wait for somebody to drop a dime on each other. If they did what they're supposed to, they'd hold bad workers more accountable. And, yeah, I've had discipline hearings with people, and
But
I've
see-
pulled them aside and as a union steward saying, what are you doing? What are you doing here? You can get
Something
fired
like
for
the
this.
teachers. My daughters have gone through Milford schools, and they've had great teachers. But along the way, they've come through a couple that,
Mm-hmm.
You're going to find that anywhere.
And the thing is, I would love to see our educators make more than secretaries or administrative assistants in corporations. You think of the responsibility they have. But on the other hand, if they ain't cutting it, I'd like to see the term at will applied.
There are ways of holding people accountable and disciplining bad workers.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like it doesn't happen. It's
But
not
does
like they
it
advertise it.
require an act of Congress?
No, it does not.
It requires something to be in the contract
It
that
requires
says
something to
how
be
that's
in
going
the
to work.
contract, right? And it also requires the administration or the appointing authority to take the initiative to do that. And there should be progressive discipline, Once,
See, I'd love
okay.
to see the teacher's average salary be six figures.
Mm-hmm.
But I want the 5% lowest achievers culled every year.
And
Just
there's a
like you're doing
mechanism
in-
for that in our contract, and I can only speak to our contract, that you have evaluations a couple times a year. And on the final evaluation, as long as you get, a meets,
Mm-hmm. Meets requirements.
meets
Yeah.
requirements, then you get your next step raise. And there is a mechanism, if you don't get that meets, and you don't get the training, and you don't improve yourself, you don't get the step raise. So there's some checks and balances.
And I have to admit, I look at the Milford Teachers Union
Mhm.
with a jaundiced view. Because I remember years ago, Now, we've been lucky. This is 16 straight years of a surplus. We just declared 8.2 million surplus for Milford. But years ago, we ran into a real tight period. And the union came up to us and said, if you'll guarantee that any money we give up stays in the school system to save teachers, we'll propose, because towns around us, the teachers were saying, well, we'll delay our raises. Wait a minute, if I can't pay my mortgage today, what makes you think in 9 or 10 months I can pay twice?
With
But-
less money.
With less money. But it hit me like, my God, you hear all about the union eats their young in the school system, and here's the union coming to us saying, we'll forego our raises this year, but you got to keep the money in the school system. To me, I'll never forget that. That is an example of people who really love our kids and care about Milford. So, when you go through that, I have no problem supporting that. And when times got better, we had to make it
So you're
up.
pro-teachers union, lukewarm on unions in general?
I'm lukewarm on protecting the underachievers.
Assuming that that's what is happening.
That's what it feels like.
Okay.
And maybe I'm not educated enough about union rules.
No, I think it's, like I said, it can promote mediocrity, but at the same time, there's checks and balances. There's
Well,
mechanisms in
Another thing about union contracts is that the whole idea of union contracts kind of emerged in an era when jobs were more stable, as just in terms of what the job was and what you did in the job, and that no, we're not going to have 50% of the job descriptions that we have today be gone and replaced by things we've never heard of within 5 years, and that kind of thing. And so one challenge, I think, with that unions and management that wants to work with unions is dealing with that kind of change in a contract.
What effect do you think it'll have that we're adding 6 million new potential workers to the job market? We've let 6 million people come across the border. The vast majority of them, I believe, no data, but I believe are for economic advantage. These are hardworking people who want a better life for their family. So they're going to want to work.
There are some states that have been in a real crunch trying to find labor to do the jobs they need done. And they've gone so far as to weaken the child safety laws so that kids can work at 14, even into the dead of night, on these jobs.
Now
which is insane.
That to me is nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever problem you're trying to solve, putting children at risk doesn't seem like a good compromise.
That's not the way to do it. No, I think the answer to that is that we should be looking around at all of the undone work that there is. And I'm thinking about the housing shortage, and I'm certainly thinking about all of the stuff we're going to have to do because of the climate crisis to both to revamp everything about how we do energy, and everything about how we heat buildings and provide transportation and so on. There probably, if we really added up what needs to be done, we actually need all of those people and more.
Working. Paying
We
taxes.
we actually need those people working and paying taxes, and we actually need to be, instead of being hostile to them, we need to actually be making good Americans out of them, which is something we know how to do.
Turn around and say being hostile to the people in the mirror.
Exactly.
Because unless you're a
we
native,
used to be them.
unless you're a Native American,
Right.
we're all immigrants of one way or another.
Right.
Now, I have a limited sense of humor about people who break our laws. It's like, Rand, I invite you into my house for dinner, you start breaking my furniture. I don't care why, get out. And I don't want to know about your rights and all this.
Right.
People who come here and now are murdering, raping, selling drugs, to me, there ought to be a quick way of deporting them, period.
Agreed.
But I mean, you look at Milford. For 40 years, I used to lean on the superintendent saying, why do you need more space? You're adding one child. And I bring the fact that in 1974, first class out of the new Milford High, which is now the old Milford High, had 222. 40 years later, we graduated 260. That's one kid per year. The last 2 years, we've added 250 kids a year.
Is that in Milford High, or that also
No,
the
that's
kids at
Milford
BVT?
across.
The whole-
What about the kids at BVT that we pay, right, to send them there? What would the numbers look like there?
I don't think they've increased that much. Because remember, BVT can limit who they accept.
Right, but that's still numbers, though, that impact.
But
financially
overall,
Milford.
we've gone from 4,200
And
to 4,600 and change. Because once the kids come to Milford, they're ours. You can argue anything you want, philosophy, whatever, but they bleed Milford red, you're going to educate them. So now you turn around and say, okay, they come with parents. And one way or another, the parents have to live.
Right.
So we're either going to fund their housing, their food, their clothing, or we're going to let them earn it.
Letting them earn it is probably a better bet.
For
I would think-
everybody.
For all things considered, all around, better for everybody.
But now, I'm hearing the mayor of New York City screaming. This was the city of San Francisco, Chicago, New York, that we're sanctuary cities. Okay. But the minute the people who wanted sanctuary started showing up, they're starting to scream that they can't deal with them.
Well, enough of them showed up all at once to create that problem. I mean,
Yeah.
it didn't, we seem to be going through a high period in immigration right now. And so, I think there are a lot of cities now that are having to scramble to figure out what to do with a lot of people in a hurry.
Well, I mean, we're
And,
lucky. The last
you know.
2 years, the state has increased our Chapter 70 money, the money for schools, by $7 million a year. So,
That's statewide,
no, that's Milford.
or just
So
Milford?
you're actually getting some resources to deal with the influx of these
I mean, you know,
kids.
we're here,
Right.
but it stayed here.
It isn't getting worse.
A lot of places, are, down in Texas and all, are just drowning.
Yep.
They can't deal with the number of people.
That's why they're shipping them out of Texas.
Can you blame them?
I think
Well,
I can.
I just-
think they probably
it
have the
depends.
money to take care of those things. They
Right.
just choose
They-
not to.
It's
They
a
don't
political
want to,
move.
yeah.
And that's an awful way to treat people. The
But
way
we're-
they're doing it, the way they're going about it
I
with
mean,
no plan.
you-
It's not as though they've called another state and go, can you take some of these people? It's just, they just dump them in, no
Right.
plan, false promises, manipulating them, and that's not
But
the right
weren't we
way
doing
to
that
do it.
before? We were flying them into New York suburbs at night.
Right,
Yeah.
and Martha's Vineyard and,
Yeah.
that
See,
was,
to
those are
me-
Florida and
publicity
Texas,
stunts.
yeah.
To me, I think both sides, the Democratic constituency as well as the Republican, both did the same thing. Biden was doing it nicer because he flew them in on jets.
Well, he didn't deceive them and tell them they're going to have jobs when they were flown over, like DeSantis did.
But what did he tell them? We're gonna move you to New York.
Venezuelan immigrants who were in the process of getting their visas, as I recall, and told them, get on this plane and you're going to be taken care of.
Yes, you're going
That's
to
what
be.
DeSantis did.
That's what
No,
DeSantis
that's what
did.
both of them did.
No. That's what DeSantis did. He specifically deceived them and told them, they're going to take care of you. Just get on this plane and go.
I thought he did buses, but same thing.
Well, he did buses on
Well,
another occasion.
Abbott has done buses.
Yeah.
Same thing, buses to California and Chicago and, other places.
But these were people who were going to be granted asylum because we have an agreement for Venezuelan citizens who want to relocate here. So they were almost certainly going to have full asylum here and would be on a path to, at the very least, be legal immigrants and maybe citizens down the road.
But Glenn, what do you do in the interim? If it's going to take them years to get green cards and the legal right to work. What do these poor people do until then?
So
Good
if
question.
they can rush them work visas, then it's not that big a deal. I mean, we do give out a lot of work visas for people who come through the asylum system.
But probably there are constraints on what the administration can do because the immigration laws haven't been adjusted to deal with the situation the way it is now. You know, we tried to have comprehensive immigration reform back in the 2012-ish time frame, and that fell through. And since then, there's been no serious attempt to do anything.
It fell through because Republicans backed out of the deal. There was a deal between the Obama administration, Senate Democrats, and Senate Republicans. It passed the Senate, but they couldn't get the votes in the House for whatever reason.
But
it was
isn't it be-
Republicans who were against it.
Isn't it becoming more bipartisan now?
I don't think so.
I don't
No.
see any
Well,
sign
you've
of
got
it.
Democratic mayors, Democratic governors screaming, "We need help."
Well, that may bump immigration up higher on the Democratic Party's priority list of issues it wants to work on, and that would be useful. But I think the two parties are very far apart on what to do about immigration.
Well, that-
I don't think
and,
Republicans are really serious about addressing the issue because they see it as a winning issue for them.
Yeah.
To scream about immigration and not doing anything about it because they just blame Democrats for the problem.
They can blame who they want, but where's the money to support all these people?
You think they care about that?
Yeah, they don't care about that.
Silly
I don't know.
you.
I think people in Texas care.
Well, they're not providing the money to support them, are they? I mean, maybe some minimal amount, but are they really interested in solving the problem? I don't
Well,
see it that way.
How
Well,
would you
they-
solve it?
Well, they seem to be putting razor wire in the Rio Grande to
Yeah.
see if they can snag some people and drown them. I
And didn't they
mean,
put them up supposedly on the American side?
Yeah, but I mean, we had the same issue when Trump was putting
we did.
kids in cages, and then all of a
Yeah, we
sudden
did.
you find out the cages were from Obama days, and now they're going back to cages. It's when
Well,
are they going to get serious about dealing with it?
So the Trump policy was specifically cruel in that they were separating the kids from their families.
Oh, yeah.
That I think was horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think there were a lot more families broken up than has really come to light.
and a lot of kids who have disappeared into the system. There was a Christian adoption agency that vacuumed up a bunch of them, and they've since disappeared in the United States somewhere. I think associated with Betsy DeVos, if I remember correctly.
Yes, the pro-education woman.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Right. So,
Talk about oxymorons.
yeah, right.
Yes.
But, you know, I think that there was a deal on the table. Part of it, and I think it's the most important part, is that you have an ability for employers to verify that somebody is a citizen before they hire them. I mean, for decades and decades, we had a policy, and every other country, by the way, has this policy that you have to have a work visa to work in the country. And Reagan stopped that. What used to be the case is that when someone who was undocumented or didn't have the proper credentials was working, the employer would be punished. But Reagan stopped that. So now employers don't have any incentive to
No
fully check
consequences,
papers.
yeah.
They're actually incentivized to hire undocumented people because they can abuse them and not.
But do
know.
you stop the flow at the border? What's the solution? If you had the magic wand, what would you do?
It's not a one solution thing. I think you look at the root of the problem. Why are these people coming in? What's going on in Central America that it's causing so much disruption? That's a piece of it. Another piece of it would be, better processing, what are we doing? We want to have these people to work so they can be productive. Is there a better way of vetting that? I don't know. Are we not supporting staffing enough people at the border too to help with that? And look at the courts too. A lot of that's backed up with the courts.
And the issue of employers exploit these people. And Trump himself hired and exploited lots of illegal immigrants in his
Working at his
businesses.
golf courses.
Building Trump Tower and all the rest of it. And so I think you have to get back to some form of enforcement at the employer level, and you probably have to accept the fact that this flow is coming, and we're going to need to take quite a few immigrants. And in fact,
Well, we've taken
as we
6
were
million.
saying-
How many more?
Well, and as we said earlier, we actually need a lot of additional people of working age to do all the work that needs to be done in this country, and that's even before you start looking at all this work we have to do because of the climate crisis, and so there's a lot of things that we could be doing.
Let's flip over to the Supreme Court.
Okay.
What is going on? I mean, I hear, kills me, Clarence Thomas, a Holy Cross boy, starting to talk about contraception. We should limit that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's been sorry.
And
But not allow abortions and not provide child care or prenatal.
but wait a minute, if you want to believe that, I'll be cold and crass, you should only have sex to procreate. That's your decision. But to step into people's bedrooms,
They've already done that with.
You won't get an argument from us on
Yeah, no
this.
kidding.
I just don't understand the logic.
There isn't. There isn't one. It's an attitude, not a rational position, and
Does
it's unrealistic given that sexuality is an inherent part of who people are. You are not going to actually succeed with that.
And that isn't by any means the end to the things they want to take away. I mean, they want to take away no-fault divorce, where if you're unhappy as a woman in your marriage, you can just say I'm done, and the
Or
divorce
as a
is
man.
final.
Yeah.
Where it used to be that you both had to agree that the marriage was over before you could divorce.
Or you had to have a reason.
There had to
Right.
be a reason,
Adultery, abuse, or
Right.
something.
a justification.
But
Right.
the reason is I want out.
Yeah. Well,
And
this
that can be
too.
good enough,
You know,
honestly.
You're an adult. I
this-
want out.
Yeah. But this is also not logic. This is not logic. It's ideology.
Right.
And now, on the plus side, we noticed that Clarence Thomas actually recused himself from a case that I'm not sure exactly what this case was, but I think it sort of tangentially implicated his wife, the insurrectionist.
Ah,
And so people have been after him to recuse himself from cases that involve things his wife is involved in for a while, and he finally did recuse himself. That is progress.
I think I know why, though. I've heard that is a fig leaf, because
Yeah,
there
could
are
be.
other cases coming where his billionaire donors and benefactors will benefit, and he will not recuse himself on those. And
those
he
are
will
because
be in on those.
because follow the money.
Are
Yeah,
you
right.
are you implying that if I give you unlimited resources and money that I would expect something back for that?
Crazy, isn't it?
I mean, astounding. I mean.
Well, the one thing I think that I've heard that's a light at the end of the tunnel is maybe we should deal with the fact that you have mandatory limits.
Mhm.
Because, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, if she had retired when she first said she might, this court would not be 6-3.
I
Yeah,
know.
it would be. That's right.
Okay? Now, I don't hold anything against her. She was incredible. But if you said once you turn 130 years old, you must step down.
And you have cancer for the seventh time.
Well, but
you know,
not
it's
just,
like, oh
once
my
you
God.
turn that,
Yeah.
I mean, I listened to Nikki Haley on the Republican side, and she says there will be mandatory testing of Supreme Court justices.
For what?
Their brains.
Oh, can we
Oh,
extend?
cognitive skills?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Do I believe that'll happen?
Of course not.
Probably not.
Maybe we should try it on presidential candidates.
Oh,
I think both of them would fail. And I know you'll disagree with me, but I think both of them would fail. But I could see saying, here's the age.
don't judges in the state have to retire at 72? I thought there
may have
was,
been something like
I think there's a
I don't know
mandatory
I don't know, but
age.
I can see not allowing an administration to de-hire a justice,
Mhm.
because that puts incredible pressure on the justice.
Well, and also the administration, the government, has cases before the court all the time, and that would represent a lever they would have over a justice.
But saying that at 75,
Mhm.
you have to retire.
You could argue that Trump did do that with Justice Kennedy.
Was it Trump or Kennedy, though, that decided that?
Well, apparently Kennedy's son worked at Deutsche Bank and got him a sweetheart loan. And so I don't know if there was some leverage involved there to get Kennedy out of the way. To
But see,
appoint
again,
somebody
if you
else.
said at 75 or 70, whatever the number is, you must retire.
Mhm.
You've just taken all the leverage away.
Well, and also, if you have staggered appointments and on a regular schedule, which you can have with term limits, then you can say, instead of having one president hit the jackpot and be able to appoint 4 Supreme Court justices or something, you know, every president would get like a crack at it every other year or
Well, see,
something.
but that was the whole thing in 16 that I found amazing, is that nobody was thinking about the Supreme Court appointments. Trump had 4 years,
And he got 3.
and he has 40 years of influence.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, wrong, or indifferent.
That's scary. That's the part that,
You know, so again, staggered, whichever way you do it, would guarantee that no one president
has that much influence over
gets
the
to
court.
change the court by, I mean, that's
Right.
33% of the court.
Right, for decades.
Yeah. Could I bring up something?
Sure.
Let's talk about the climate march.
Yeah, we should, because both of us were at it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, so this was September 17th, and we both rode down, this is the March to End Fossil Fuels, it was called. And this was really the first major climate march since COVID. And it kind of represented the climate movement getting back in the streets for the first time in a long time. And it went a lot better than we really expected. The numbers are in the 75,000 range for a march that started on Broadway and 52nd Street or something, and then made its way over to First Avenue, a little ways north of the UN. And this was to highlight a conference that the UN Secretary General held. It was called a Climate Ambition Conference, which basically was a conference of heads of state who are serious about the climate crisis, and there were you had to have a certain level of plans to actually address the climate crisis in order to get to address the meeting, which I thought was interesting. That's different from what happens at the COP summits.
what was the objective of the march?
Get back in the streets and raise consciousness, raise the issue, put renewed pressure on political leaders to take more action.
Does it work?
Time will tell, but we know that sitting back on your hind
Won't do anything.
Won't
won't
do
do
anything.
anything. So
What do they say? If nothing changes and nothing changes,
right,
you know?
Right.
And
you
What
know.
was, how many were at the 2014? Was that the
The,
last
the
one?
big one in 2014 in
I
New
was
York
there
City.
too.
You were there too?
Uh-huh.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
There were 400,000 of us in that one, and that was a river of humanity that went
Yeah.
from like 87th Street and Central Park West down to like 27th Street and 11th Avenue, there were so many people that they actually called off the march in the middle because there was no place at the terminus of the march. There was not enough room for
It's
that
just
many
going to back
people.
up.
Yeah, right. So they just basically told everybody who hadn't gotten there by a certain time, don't keep marching, just disperse now.
But what do you do to make fundamental change happen?
Well, you build
Awareness.
awareness. You build support. You build willingness of people to go and put pressure on the political system.
See, that I
And-
can understand.
Yeah,
Get people active,
Mhm.
kind of
right.
protesting is cute. But if there's no outcome
Mhm.
to say, okay, this is how we're going to change.
But how do you know there'd be no outcome if you don't protest?
Well,
right?
actually, the other thing about it is what these movements actually also do is they make people who are concerned about climate aware of each other. There is empowerment in
Yeah.
discovering that there are hundreds of thousands of people who also are concerned about this. And
Yeah.
it has inspired a lot of people to get active ongoingly and to become involved in lobbying their state legislature or beating up on Biden or the Congress about its unwillingness to cut itself free from the fossil fuel lobby and all of this stuff.
But hasn't Biden sort of done that?
Well, here's the paradox. Biden has done more about the climate than anybody else
Right.
up till now. The Inflation Reduction Act is actually causing a revolution in industrial development that is bringing manufacturing back to the United States and doing it in a way that is targeted towards the energy systems of the future. And that's all great. But Biden has also, he has allowed a lot of oil leases to be let. He has allowed a lot of pipelines to happen. He's allowed a lot of LNG plants to be built and other things that other infrastructure things that we should not be doing.
But now,
And-
Rand, the leases.
Yeah.
I understand there's a lot of leases.
Mm-hmm.
But am I wrong when I read that the drilling permits have been the lowest of any president?
It's a question of drilling permits follow leases in an irregular pattern, right? We were talking about this earlier. Companies will lease a tract and then they'll later make decisions about when to drill because they know how much it's going to cost to develop a given
At $60
field, and
a
the
barrel,
price has to be high enough.
I'm not going to drill.
Right.
At $100 a barrel,
I might, yeah. So there's not a direct correlation there.
And Wall Street punishes them for exploring because it's expensive and it hurts their bottom line. So Wall
Right.
Street would prefer that they just continue milking what they have and keeping the price high.
Right.
I mean, really, as you said when we had our offline conversation, Ren, it's they're essentially competing against themselves. If they provide too much oil to the system, it'll drop the price. So they can make almost 70, 80, 90, $100 a barrel, and still make huge profits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But so we should hear from you about how the march was for you.
Well, it's just exciting. It really gets your blood pumping, and you're meeting other people from all over the U.S., even other countries, and we're all sharing the same vision and the same concerns. And it was really exciting to be a part of that. I thought everybody was very organized and polite. Even the police were very helpful, and
Yeah, we went around thanking the police
Yeah.
The
afterwards.
one thing I heard that was very positive was there were no riots.
Right.
no,
There was no hoodlumism.
No, that's not what this is about.
no.
Yeah, but too many of these protests start that way.
How many?
Too many out in the Pacific Northwest.
Are we talking about back when George Floyd and all that was happening?
Yeah.
Again, that doesn't represent protests in general, I feel. I think a lot of
No,
them
but it
generally
paints a
are
bad
peaceful.
brush.
Well,
You know,
I think what ends up happening is when you protest the police have a different attitude about your protest.
Good point.
Than they
Right.
would
We
for
weren't
other
protesting
protests.
the police.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, we were.
Yeah, and I mean, think about it. I've said it a number of times that I'm really proud that Milford has had 2 demonstrations about our police, both positive.
Mm-hmm.
And that really has
Yeah.
made a difference in the attitudes of the officers, our ability to attract good officers.
Yeah, we actually discovered that in talking to the police afterwards, a lot of them are with us on this issue.
Mhm.
You know, that
They were
They're-
there for our safety. They were organized. They helped people along. It was a really good experience.
well, and they don't want Manhattan to get flooded when the sea level rises. I mean,
We already had that problem
Yeah.
recently.
Well, the next
With
show
the
we'll
rain.
start off with talking about the crime in America. Because
like Trump was saying people are murdered on the streets and they're going after him. How dare they?
no, but crime has been going up.
yeah.
And it's
What-
been going down lately. The last couple of years, it's gone down.
They're mostly in the red states where they have higher crime, a lot more guns.
Well, whatever the reason,
Yeah.
it's a
It's-
scary movie.
Well, it's scary and bad for those involved, regardless of whether they live in a red state or a blue state, and no matter what their political persuasion is.
I got a problem that a congressman got carjacked, and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
all over the place.
Mhm.
I don't care if he's a Democrat or a Republican. He's a person.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's a congressman doesn't make me feel any better or worse. The fact that he got all this attention, and there were 12 or 13 other carjackings in a short period of time that nobody notices, bothers me. The fact that CVS is pulling out 9 stores out of the inner cities.
And that's really bad for the residents there.
Oh, God, yeah.
You start thinking about where are they going to get their medicine? You know, it's easy to say, well, they'll just drive 10 miles.
No, they
They-
won't.
A lot of them can't.
Yeah, a lot of them don't have vehicles.
Cars.
Yeah, can't afford the medicine anyway.
So that'll be the starting topic for our next show.
Okay.
Thank you for joining. Thanks for the unique
Thank you
view
for
on the
having us.
union.
Yeah, thanks for holding this.
And to our 6 loyal viewers, may God bless. May tomorrow be a better day than today. Thanks for joining. Good night, all.
Far too long since I've been home. Been running all my life just searching for my soul.